Welcome to Fresh Catholic, a podcast for those who are converting, reverting, or simply want a fresh perspective of the Catholic faith to help them to open their hearts and minds to become closer to the love and goodness of Christ. My daily prayer is that I will be a bright light to others, to be filled with the love and light of Christ, so that when people look at me, they see Him radiating out from me for His glory. Hello and welcome. I'm Lori Balderas, and I'm so happy you're here. I would like to introduce my guest today. Michael Pakaluk received his PhD in philosophy from Harvard University under John Rawls, a professor at the Catholic University of America and an authority on Aristotelian ethics. His recent books include Mary's Voice in the Gospel According to John, Be Good Bankers, The Economic Interpretation of Matthew's Gospel, The Memoirs of St. Peter, and the book he's here to discuss today, The Shock of Holiness. He is married to economist and social philosopher Catherine Pakaluk, PhD, and he is the father of 15 children. Sadly, he lost his first wife, Ruth, to cancer in 1998. It has recently been announced that the Vatican Dicastery for the Causes of Saints has declared her life worthy of further investigation for sainthood. Wow, I can't wait to hear more about that and his newest book. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Pakaluk. Well, good afternoon, Dr. Pakaluk, but I guess I can call you Michael.
Please do, Lori.
I can. There you are. Hello. I'm so happy to have you here today. I've been just feverishly reading your book.
Great.
I finished.
Wonderful. Oh, you did. Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. I really appreciate you coming today. Where in the world are you coming from today?
We live in Hyattsville, Maryland, and we're right next to the University of Maryland. So from our front steps, you can look out over some houses and see the buildings of the university. It's a faculty neighborhood. It's called College Heights Estates, right next to University Park, which is very well known, and that's where we live.
Oh, I bet that's beautiful.
It is really beautiful. They're old homes, old trees, hills. Most of the homes are brick. Lots of people walking out in the neighborhood. It's just lovely, especially for Christmas and also Halloween. Everybody really does it up for Halloween.
Well, I've never been to Maryland before, but Simon and I are about to take off on a long road trip / honeymoon. I've been waiting for a honeymoon for 10 years. So we're about to take off and head back east. So maybe we'll check out Maryland.
Well, I'm not going to recommend it for vacation or for sightseeing, although the Queen Elizabeth, when she came to the United States, and she wanted to see a typical American middle class house. They actually brought her to a house that's about 2 blocks away from where we live, and she visited that house.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's good for Queen Elizabeth. That's good for me.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Maybe you should go see Queen Elizabeth's house. That's something worth seeing.
Maybe I should. So I am really happy to have you here today to discuss your book, The Shock of Holiness. And what I would love for you to do is if you could please give my listeners, from your point of view, an overview of the book.
I became clearer about my own project, believe it or not, by reading a recent book by Andrew Klavan called The Truth and Beauty. And this is a book about the Romantic movement of English poets, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Keats, and how they wanted to draw attention to the beauty of everyday life. And through that, they thought they could find a way towards a deeper truth about the universe. And, well, apart from recommending the Romantic poets, I think that that's what I'm up to. John Henry Newman says somewhere that these poets were anticipating what finds its fullest realization in the Catholic Church. So if you will, there's a kind of poetry and beauty in the ordinary realities of Catholic life, sacramentals like holy water, going to daily Mass, the lives of saints, the devotion to Saint Joseph. And my goal in this book was to bring out, with the eyes of a philosopher and a kind of poet, that's who I am, these help people to see these things and then to see through them to these grand realities that we're living in. It's like the air. You know, it's actually something that C.S. Lewis also says, that the fish don't recognize they're in water because they're in water all the time. Catholics can fail to recognize that they're actually immersed in this kind of beautiful truth because they might even take it for granted. So it's to help Catholics see that, and I think that brings a lot of joy to a certain kind of youthful joy to the practice of the Catholic faith.
And you're a convert, is that correct?
Yes. Well, my parents never went to Mass, so they were cultural Catholics in the real sense of the term. And they did bring their children to the sacraments the way they bought encyclopedias for the household and make sure that we got music lessons. But there was really no practice of the faith, no praying, no discussing the Bible, no talking about God, no common consciousness of Catholic faith or Catholic truth in my household. And so by the time I went to college, I regarded myself as an atheist. And I had a conversion experience in college where I became first an evangelical Christian, and then over a 3-year period, I became a Catholic. And for me, you know, somebody when they're 20 years old or 21 years old, a 2 or 3 year period where you're searching for the truth really does seem like a lifetime. And you do go through so many steps and twists and turns, so many arguments, so many texts that you read, that it seems like your whole life is bound up in this time of looking for the truth. So yes, I am a convert. People could call me a revert if they want, but subjectively it was as though I were dead and I became alive.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, a lot of my listeners, I have many different types of listeners. They're all over the world, but I do have converts, reverts. I have people, you know, who are trying to decide what they want to do. I'm a convert. I converted at age 49. I was raised in no religion. I ended up becoming a Christian, Protestant Christian. Loved that in the beginning. Kind of became a bad. I wasn't the best Christian, honestly. And then I found
Yeah.
Catholicism, and I feel the same way. It's like I fell in love with Jesus. That's why I became a Christian. Absolutely couldn't get enough of him. But then it was such a watered down version in comparison to Catholicism for me. That's how
Mm,
I kind of looked at it. And I kind of agree with you. I mean, what I gather from a lot of people who are cradle Catholics, many of them don't know why they're doing what they're doing. I
mm,
think, I feel, I mean, this is a very general statement and I don't really mean it like that, but I feel like a lot of people, when they have something so special close to them, they take it for granted, whether it's Catholicism or family members or, you know, things of spiritual value, they take them for granted. And, you know, that's one of the things I love, love, love about the Catholicism and the Catholic faith and Catholic Church is the richness, the beauty, the I love, you know, all these things about it that maybe people do kind of take for granted. And I was getting that in your book where, you know, like your take on a lot of things. I felt like I was privy to your inner dialogue.
mm.
That
Well,
was
let me say this, Lori. I became Catholic now, over 40 years ago, and um, in 40 years of living in the faith and staying in a state of grace, there's a reforming of your character that takes place. It's supposed to take place. And so I would say that in this book, the task was, I want to say, a relatively youthful and light-hearted task of uncovering the beauty of everyday life. But it's always easy to say something that's not really truthful because you leave something out. And so if we were to go back to the time when I converted, I think I would want to say I was very deeply caught in sin, that I was committing what a Catholic would call a mortal sin on a regular basis. And it caused a lot of depression, a lot of unhappiness, a lot of guilt, a lot of recrimination, a lot of lack of self-confidence. I felt like I was captive, and Christianity set me free. It really did set me free from that, and it also gave me a sense, like insight into who I was and what the purpose of my life was, and a kind of strength of will also to accomplish things. Of course, it takes time, and you go through a period of purgation and so on. But that's all real. Sin is real. The grip of the devil is real, and liberation from sin is real. And the sacramental system of the church is necessary medicine for that.
Right. And I feel like I was a similar, especially, prior to becoming Christian, I was definitely not leading, I didn't really have a compass. I mean, I did. I have really good parents and really good, they taught me really good things, but I never had like the compass of Jesus. I never had like that where now I feel like, even though I'm a sinner, I make mistakes all the time. I'm always doing something wrong or handling something improperly, but I strive so much to be in the right graces with our Lord. That's really important to me, and I do meet with a lot of resistance of that, and I know that He's with me all the time, and He's what gets me through every single day.
Yeah. And how can it be the case, as it was with me, that I was a Harvard student? I was one of a graduating class of 1,000 at my high school in Long Island who was admitted to Harvard. So one out of 1,000 top student, getting A's at Harvard when it was still difficult, back in the day when it was actually difficult to get A's. So a leading student, I ended up winning a prestigious scholarship. I pleased all of my super brilliant professors. How could it be that somebody like that actually could lack complete sense about who he was and what his life was about and what are the most important realities in life? But that was true. That was me. So, and by the way, that's tremendous encouragement for the apostolate, because most of the people we're dealing with are like that. They are in that condition, and they won't be helped if we try to beat them over the head in any way. But by befriending them and by praying for them and by trying to set a good example, we can help others maybe to break free from that.
Right. And I do feel like, I don't know if you felt this way, but I always say there's like a gaping hole or a missing puzzle piece, which is Jesus. And, when you don't even realize you have that missing piece, I didn't know what I was missing. And then when you
Yeah.
bring, when you have Him come into your life, a lot of it, again, I'll just speak for myself. It's like I was giving so much effort to it in the beginning of becoming a Protestant Christian. And then it just kind of like I drifted off, because of my living situation and all sorts of things. I'm not making excuses. I'm just being honest. It was just,
Yeah.
I drifted off, but then, I'm so serious about this faith, and I love being devout Catholic. And, I really need that structure, that guidelines, the unconditional love of our Lord. That's the most important thing to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when I became a Christian, St. Paul was really important for me, and uh, I think ultimately that's where there's a kind of romanticism that's in this book, Shock of Holiness, and it's called finding the romance in everyday life. That's its subtitle, and I want to say that romance, I can trace it back to St. Paul. I mean, what's more romantic than I have been crucified with Christ, and the life which I now live, I live by faith in the Son of God. Um, this is highly the idea that you're not even living your own life, you're living a life shared or given to you by someone else, and that you've died in someone else's dying. That's about as romantic as you can get. And so when I converted, I became an evangelical Christian. I memorized a lot of Bible verses, and I still ponder them. I still carry them around with me, and especially some of the great lines from St. Paul.
I love St. Paul as well. I think he's such a inspiration, I mean, just I always loved the story, his conversion. I'm not laughing because it's
Yeah.
funny. It's like if Saint Paul can become a saint, so can I. It's like
Yeah.
he was the worst of the worst, and
Yeah, that's so true.
yeah. So I just think he's such a good role model. Um, your book, I feel, is it is, how you write it is very beautiful, very thoughtful. It's very different. I feel like it's a very different sort of book. And I just think it's really an interesting presentation. And I'm wondering, like, what prompted you to create it in the way you did? Because it's, just so my listeners know, it's a series of essays, and you have like 5 parts to the book. And I'm going to tell my listeners the parts. There's The Romance of Daily Life, Shock of Holiness, Mary and Joseph, Sex and Marriage, Life and Manners. And so it's like like I said, I feel like I was privy to your inner thoughts, because it reminded me that I don't know how you wrote the essays, if you wrote them over a period of time, if you kind of like wrote them and put them to the side. It kind of reminds me of, like, throughout my day, I think of things like I have a dialogue with Jesus, or maybe a saint. I'll say, please pray for me. Again, we don't worship saints, but we do pray, ask them to pray for us in intercession. So, I that's what it reminded me of, is like I was imagining you like having a thought and you're like sitting and thinking about it, and you write it down, and you're like having a collection. Maybe that's not what you did, but I just felt like, I was hanging out with you for the day, and you were telling these nuggets of knowledge.
Well, that's not far from the truth. I mean, I think these essays are fruits of course, theological and philosophical study, but also interior life, and sometimes even somewhat desperate prayers to the Holy Spirit, because they're actually all essays that appeared in the Catholic Thing, which is kind of an online magazine, and I've written for them for 10 years, and I write every 2 weeks, so that's what, 1,000 essays? Is that what it works out to be? Anyway, hundreds of essays. And I thought a lot of these essays are not mere journalism. Journalism means writing for the day. That's what it means literally. Jour is French for a day, right? So it's something that you write for a day, it's gone, and then the next day you turn to something else. But some of these essays, I think, are of enduring value, that they can be read, and they will be read for years to come. So I wanted to collect them together, and I want to put them in an enduring form, which is a printed book. And I wanted them to be put in a form where people could give them to somebody, and you'll see that, the book is beautiful. It's got a gorgeous cover. It's really well printed. It's something you could give to somebody as a gift, and it looks like you're giving them something that's meaningful. It's not some of these cheaply produced books that they have these days. So that's what I wanted to do, and so I've got good friends, I have to say. I sent maybe 300 essays to several good friends who agreed to do this, and they read through them and they graded them for me. So they say A as you absolutely have to include this one, C as no, you should not include this, excluded, and B as borderline. And I took the intersection, the Venn diagram intersection of their A choices, and presented them to Ignatius Press, and then that was 100, and Ignatius Press said, no, cut this down to 50. So then I had to go through it again. So these are the cream of the cream, as far as I'm concerned. And it's funny, the Father Fessio, who's the founder and original publisher of Ignatius Press, is famous for saying, and Catholic authors know this, Ignatius Press is not going to publish any collections of essays because people are not going to read any collections of essays that have been written by G.K. Chesterton. So that's his view, but this managed to crack through. In other words, this made it through that barrier. This collection, even Father Fessio apparently was convinced, was good enough that Ignatius would publish it. And to me, that's such a high honor. It really is, because it puts me in the company of a Chesterton or Father Shaw, great essayists. That's what I want it to be. I want to be, among other things, to write books and other things, but I want to be a Catholic essayist. So that's what this is. This is the book of a Catholic essayist.
Well, I love that. And for my listeners, we will be putting a link in the show notes for his book. And yeah, order it. It's Christmas time, and what's better than books for Christmas? I also think this is a good book. I mean, it's for, I don't know exactly who like if you wrote for a specific what's the word I want to say? I can't think of the word. When I can't, I'm having a mind blip.
Well,
Um,
I wrote it for I would say a fairly thoughtful uh, lay person, somebody who's probably married, professional person, somebody who's serious about life. But I also wrote it for young people. I want to bring in and attract young people.
yeah, I was gonna say I would also think it's good for like young adults and even like
Yeah.
older teenagers. I think they're the way you've written it, because they're short essays, they're very doable. It's like a
Yeah.
doable book. This is also a book I like to match books up with like times of the liturgical year. This book can be a great book for the Easter season because it's 50 chapters. So
Mm.
there's 50 days of Easter, so you can read a chapter a
Wow.
day.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, they're doable. They're 1,000 words, and I left it out on our breakfast table. My kids know that I'm an author, and they read some of my things, but they're all kind of, what is he up to? What does Dad really think? What's in his heart? And they loved it. They really, you could, as you say, you could pick it up, read one a day, and so it's perfect for the modern life, really.
Right. And that's what I think is really important sometimes in books, where because we live in a fast-paced world, people don't want to unfortunately sit down and enjoy a book sometimes, and they want to make it something they can get through. So I that was one of my takeaways from it, was like I was like, "Oh, it's very doable." And I love that.
Yep.
And then they each essay can live on its own. It's like
Yeah.
you have them in chapters, but they can live on their own, which is also a great thing about it.
There's a lot of concentration of thought and reflection in each of the essays, and so you could read one in the morning, and people have told me they'll spend the whole day thinking about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's why, and I think some of the ways that you were expressing yourself, I've never really heard some of the things you were saying. It's not like, oh, this is the same old book, and these are, it's very just the same old thing I've always read, or I already know that, or I've already heard that. That's why I felt like I was really getting inside your head, because I could, it was, they were very unusual ways of expressing it, not in a bad way, in a
Yeah.
great way.
When this book was coming out, we had a meeting with the publicists, and they asked me what was my take on the essays, and I said, this is what I count as a good essay. I want a good essay to say something new, to be brilliant, to say it in such a way that it kind of leaps out at you, and then also to be true. So if it's new, true, and brilliant, then then I've been a success. Then my essay's been a success. So I'm not going to judge for myself, but Lori, that's what I aim to do in my essay. So when you say I've never heard this before, that definitely resonates with the new.
Yeah. And also the honesty of it. It was, there's a lot of deep love in there, that, you're expressing deep love, but also you're being really honest about
Mm.
some things and your take on things. And I think
Yeah,
that's good.
like like I have an essay, "Is Once Enough," which is about the marital act, and really asking whether married. It's obviously a thought experiment. I have 15 children, so obviously more than once. But is there something about this notion of consummation which makes one single marital embrace contain everything that needs to be contained in the life of a married couple? And in fact, for many couples, it has been, because they've gotten married before the man has gone off to war. He's leaving on a ship the next day. They get married. They have one honeymoon night, and they regard themselves as fully married. And he's out there in the trenches for 3 years, and he can be, and with the grace of God, he is faithful to his wife because they're solidly bonded together. Well, I think it's a good sign that whichever essay I happen to be reading at the moment is my favorite essay. It's like a parent and children. But the one that I go back to again and again is the one that's called Lord of Substance, which I think is the second essay in the book, because this is based on a reflection which I believe is new, involving relating the feeding of the 5,000 on the shore to the miracle of walking on water, because our Lord clearly wanted to link those two things together. Because after feeding the 5,000, he told the disciples to get into the boat and go across the lake without him. So, and he planned to walk across water to them. So it's a completely designed, staged miracle. And I think when Jesus designs and stages something, he does so in order to teach. So that's how I approached this topic. I said, well, what was he trying to teach by walking on water? Now, not that he was a miracle doer, because that's already been, he taught that many, many times. So there's something else there had to be something about the particular nature of this miracle. And I came to the conclusion that in the Greek world there were four substances: earth, air, fire, and water. So I said, well, what if Jesus wanted to prove or show or demonstrate to the disciples specifically that as Lord, he had command over substances, and in fact, he could turn one substance into another. He could say to water, turn into fire, and it would, right? But also do so at the same time that would continue to look like the substance that it was, right? So you say, I'm going to turn water into fire, right? And it becomes fire, but it looks like water. And then he would say, somebody might say, if you turned water into fire, but it continues to look like water, well, how have you turned water into fire? Because it looks like water, right? You wouldn't be able to show it if it continues to look like water. So the only way he could show it, in my view, is the way he did show it. He took a liquid substance, water, and he walked on it, which means that it behaved like the solid substance in this elementary Greek cosmology. It behaved like earth. And so what it was in its nature was earth, but it continued to look like water. That's what he walked on. So it's a type of transubstantiation, where the bread and the wine are transformed into the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ, but they continue to look like bread and wine. And that's how he taught that he had the power that's prefigured in the feeding of the 5,000. That's about it, Laurie. Together with a lot of prayer that comes before that. Help me out. I've got a deadline, please.
What is happening at Fresh Catholic? Thanks for asking. Well, we have a weekly podcast with lots of topics and guests, and Fresh Catholic Daily, the daily Mass readings. Listen on all platforms and watch on YouTube. I also do short videos every day on Instagram and Facebook at Fresh Catholic. Like, share, subscribe, rate, and review. These are such simple ways to help us out. The other ways you can support our mission of drawing people to the faith or back to the faith are by becoming a Patreon or sponsor. Also simple, but so needed. Our website, freshcatholic.com, has an online store with merchandise, a blog, comics, and Fresh Catholic courses with educator Charles Merritt, with the Hail Mary, the Our Father, the Virtues, the Ascension, the Magi, the Visitation, the Ten Commandments, Sacraments and Grace, Sin, Advent, Angels, Lent, Typology, and even some Bible study courses. Wow, that's a lot. Please share all of this with everyone you know and join the Fresh Catholic family. And remember, be focused, be faithful, and be fresh. Oh, wait, one more thing. Our Typology series by educator Charles Merritt is feeling very unloved. I know, I get it. You see or hear that word, typology, and your eyes glaze over. You stifle a yawn. You might think to yourself, or even say to others, dry, boring, too Old Testament-ish for me. If that's you, then you're missing out, because typology connects the promise of Jesus in the Old Testament and the arrival of Jesus in the New Testament. It's like putting scripture under a microscope and seeing things you never saw before. So head to our website, freshcatholic.com, and give typology some love and attention. You will be amazed. And we're back. So Michael, you have 15 children. That's a lot.
It seems like a lot, but when I explain it to people, and people have asked, I remember once having a conversation with a professor at Cambridge University when I had only 8 children. He said, Michael, is it true that you had 8 children? Which, of course, to most people seems like an unbelievable amount. And I said to my friend, yeah, they kind of accumulate over time. It's like your retirement account, and it grows very quickly, and if you don't pay any attention to it over time, they accumulate. That's how I view it. Or somebody else once asked me, how can you take care of so many children? I said, look, it's very simple. Suppose I gave you 1 ball to juggle, and you had a whole year to juggle 1 ball, and then you had 2 years to juggle 2 balls, and then 2 more years to juggle 3. I'm sure you could probably juggle 10 balls.
Oh my goodness. So
if
you
you
had
add 1 every 2 years.
Yeah. So you had 7 children with your wife, Ruth.
Yes.
And then 8 children with your wife, Catherine. So
That's
what
right.
is the age range of your children?
Well, let's see. I got married to Ruth when we were in college. I don't think I was 20 years old. So the eldest child now, Michael, is 43, and the youngest is 9.
Oh my goodness. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
So, and how many boys do you have and how many girls?
10 and 5.
10 boys?
10 boys, 5 girls.
Wow. So you only have to pay for 5 weddings. So that's cool.
I know. Yeah, 3 down. 3 down, 2 to go.
Oh my gosh. So, all like whether you have 1 child or 15, I suppose there's challenges to having children. What have you found to be like the biggest challenge of raising your children?
It's hard to say because, as you indicate, there's so many different challenges. There's the challenge of getting enough money to pay for things like braces. There's the challenge of being available to them. So working really hard, especially establishing your career, but then also being available. There's a challenge of making life very happy for them so that they really love their childhood, and that's what they want to return to, and they want to create a good childhood for their own children in turn. There's the challenge of, as a father, being a good example and being the spiritual leader of the household. A challenge of reading to them. It's so vital for children, and can be hard for a professional man, somebody's working very hard, especially early in the career, establishing yourself, finding that time to read to your children. So there are many, many, many challenges. The challenge of affording diapers, the challenge of getting a vehicle that's large enough for them, the challenge of maintaining that vehicle and dealing with when it breaks down, as it will, because you're not going to have a new car. Yeah, lots and lots and lots of work.
Because you basically need a school bus.
I'm pretty sure that when I proposed to Catherine, I said to her that we're not going to have a van. That was part of the condition. We'll drive some kind of large SUV, but eventually we did get a 15-passenger van. Yeah, that was necessary at one point.
Wow. Also, I understand what you're saying, because I do think, spending time with your children, again, kind of however many you have, because here's the thing, when you have 15 children, like you say, they come a little at a time. It's not like you get 15 at once. They come a little at a time, and you kind of have to acclimate as the children come. But I do know time and effort and energy, making sure that everybody's feeling loved and noticed and all these things, that's a challenge. Again, this is why, God, gives us a partner in life, like
Mm,
it's really hard to do things on your own, which I'm sure
yeah.
you figured out when your
Yes.
wife passed away. Um, but I do also feel like a lot of people spring into action and help when, there's like a person that loses the spouse, I mean, that's what I've never had that happen, but I know my friends that have had a similar situation, where people really spring into action and help. And then I would imagine the children all end up helping, to manage the other children naturally. Is that what you found?
Well, I think after my wife died, that it's the children are crushed, and so they're not ready so much to be helping one another. They're all kind of suffering. I think that yeah, the community we had were very, very generous, and essentially, drop off the children anytime you want, and we'll take care of them. And even among Ruth's friends, there's maybe even like an over extension. If I'll raise your children, I'll take care of them. But as valuable as all this is, the Catholic idea of subsidiarity, it doesn't take the place of a husband and wife, a mother and father raising children. It can stand in its subsidiarity. It helps, but it can't really replace that. And I don't know why I thought that I could even just neglect getting married again, but that's obviously what I thought. When my first wife was dying, I actually didn't want to get married again. I told her very plainly that. I I really love scholarship, and I told her when she was on her deathbed, and this is actually kind of a strange thing to say, and but it reflects on how truthful what I said, that I really love the times when I'd gone away, say, to Oxford for weeks and just been able to study 12 hours a day. That was among the happiest days of my life. I joke that I'd always want to be a monk, and I can kind of pursue a monk-like life when she passed away, and that was all absurd. And people say absurd things when they're suffering from, severe illness or death. That was all absurd because she was, we had young children. So she really said to me that she thought I ought to get remarried, and I didn't, I didn't pay much attention to it until later on, of course. And I don't know what caused her to mention the name of somebody she thought I ought to marry, somebody who had just been graduated from college. So, and I thought to myself, this is very strange. I'm telling my dying wife, because she was going to die in 4 weeks after that, that I don't want to get remarried, and I couldn't. Besides, I couldn't even find anybody like her to marry again. There's no point even looking. It would be a pointless exercise. And then she's matching me up essentially with an undergraduate. This struck me as being bizarre beyond words. Nonetheless, when I thought I had gone through mourning, and several months later, I thought, well, at least I'll get in touch with this person, because that's kind of like a duty I owe to my dying wife. So I did, and we ended up falling in love, and now we're married for a much longer time. And Catherine says to me, "I'm now the oldest woman you've ever been married to," and that's true.
So Ruth, she's the one, she picked Catherine for you. Like that's who she wanted.
Yeah, when she was diagnosed with cancer, she had a rosary group, and there's a famous thing that she kind of told all the women in a rosary group about her prognosis and where the cancer was and something, and then she slapped her hands together and said, "Right, now let's start praying that Michael can find a young wife." Like that's her first intention. She was diagnosed with cancer. So I don't know, but apparently she had been praying about this for many years, and she had gotten into her mind that Catherine would be a good wife for me. Those are the exact words she used. She said, "I've for a long time thought that Catherine Hardy would make a good wife for you." And she was dying then, and that was the same year that Catherine moved from University of Pennsylvania, where she was in college, to Harvard, where she started graduate school. Now, we were in Worcester, Massachusetts, but we went to Harvard, so we was regarded as Harvard as kind of the same neighborhood. So uh, Ruth took that as a sign that her intimation had some truth to it. So she mentioned it to me, which is kind of, I think it's a bold thing for you to do if you're dying, to actually to name somebody as what you've intimated. It's all very strange.
Yeah, I had a similar thing. I was in a really horrible accident many years ago, and I was always, afterwards still like recovering from it and everything. And before I was Catholic, when I was married to the children or my children's father, I told him who I wanted him to marry if I died. And he was like, why would you even say that? And I said, because I think she'd be a perfect mother for our children and I love her. And so when he and I divorced, he tried dating her. I'm thinking, well, that's not what I meant, but okay.
That's hilarious.
Anyway,
Yeah, that is
um,
hilarious.
what would be some good solid advice that you would have that you could give parents in today's climate? Like you're raising these children, you're trying to be a conscientious father. I'm not laughing because it's funny. We're living in such a strange climate, in our world. What's some good advice that you could give to parents, who are raising families today?
Well, lots of good advice, and I should probably write a book about it. But one is that husband and wife really need to love each other in a very sincere and thorough way, so that the children are attracted to that, and they want to do the same thing. And then they need to make their household very happy, so that even if they go off the reservation when they're older, it's like the prodigal son. Well, at least in my father's house, I got fed, unlike eating this food for the pigs. They always remember that as a place where they did enjoy happiness. And then I think you really do need to tend to education. This is where a lot of Catholic parents drop the ball. Now, some of them believe they have no recourse and they have to send their kids to, say, public schools because they can't afford anything else. But there's some pretty inexpensive homeschooling alternatives available now, and great things like the Seton Academy and other Colby Academy. They're not that expensive and they're online, and I think they're really great alternatives because the formation of the education is really so important. If you want to keep your kids, you've got to be sure that they get a Catholic education. And then I think forming networks of families where children can, in a spontaneous way, form friendships and they don't feel like they're being helicoptered by their parents. So you get together with, three or four other families that have lots of kids that are roughly the same age, and then your kids will naturally and spontaneously form friendships. And they do have to have a sense of this is how we do things in this family, this is how we do things in this culture, in this group of friends. It's different from the way the world is doing these other things, and it's better because it makes for happiness, and these are the reasons why, and this is the way we've been taught, and this is the better way to live.
Right. I totally agree with that. I think that um, if you have that where you do, I've talked about this in another podcast, where if you gravitate to families where you're in the same, faith, then the children all, one of them doesn't say, oh, well, I can't do that because I'm Catholic. They're all Catholic. They all, can or can't do whatever they're talking about. I mean, it's their lifestyle. They don't have to like feel awkward about it or try to justify it. It's just like, I think that is a successful way. I also feel like what you're saying about homeschooling. I think if you can't afford Catholic school, you can make a commitment to do homeschool, because if you have one parent working and the other one can do the homeschool, or you do it with a network of people, um, you can take the time off to do that. It's important, it's valuable and important.
Yeah,
And I think people do struggle obviously with the finances of it, but your time, you can give up your time if it's for the
yeah,
well-being of your children. Yep.
yeah, yeah. That's right. And yeah, we're agreement with that. And there's something. It's a single parents or a single fathers in particular. He's the one who's the authority. I mean, Pius XI calls the father the head of the household. The mother is the heart of the household. Um, the father's authority alone is not sufficient to impart to the children the sense that what he's teaching them about the right way to live is objectively true. It's not just the assertion of his will for them. So to get this sense that there's an objective framework, an objective world where Catholic principles really do work out to be the best, you need to have a broader community. Maybe it's your parish, maybe it's this group of friends you and I were talking about, but it has to, maybe it's just some good coaches and good teachers, but they have to have a sense that this is the objectively right way of looking at things that goes beyond the will of the Father, especially when you're dealing with your teenage boys who are not going to be doing something necessarily because their father's telling them to do it. They do have a tendency to assert their own will against their father, and that's the way it should be. And the father needs to recognize that. Some fathers are very controlling, and they think that they alone can raise their children to adulthood, and they can't.
Yeah, it's definitely a team effort, that's for sure. So Ruth, who passed away in 1998 of cancer, she's on her path to sainthood. What are your thoughts about that? Because this has just happened recently that this has come up. Is that true?
The nihil obstat, nothing stands in the way of her cause proceeding, which came from the Vatican, was issued on Saint Michael the Archangel's day, so September 29th. So this is, we didn't get it, receive it in the United States until about a month after that, but it's still relatively recent. I have to say that my reaction to it is um, it's mixed. On the one hand, objectively and with impartiality, I think it's the greatest thing in the world that a mom with a large family who's pro-life and from America and Worcester, Massachusetts, which is a very humble place, no less, might be declared a saint. I think that'd be fantastic for the church, and she would stand for moms everywhere, and she stand for pro-life people everywhere. I think that would be really fantastic. And she was also somebody who lived the plan of life recommended by Opus Dei. So she went to daily mass and she prayed twice a day and read the scripture and said the rosary. And I think that that kind of plan is, pretty practically speaking, close to necessary for real progress in towards holiness, and which we're all supposed to be striving for, right? We're all supposed to be universal call of holiness and all that. That's Vatican II. So I think that would be just a tremendous good, and I think that is why it's being received with tremendous joy. I don't know anybody who hasn't been overjoyed by the news. On the other hand, personally, um, sometimes it's a little cringeworthy the way people cover her or cover her life and say cliches about sainthood and so on. And also, to be honest, there's a kind of re-encountering of her passing that has taken place for me since a kind of turning again to that time. And you've experienced, I'm sure, that when you have suffered the death of a loved one, you, after a initial period of mourning, grief comes to you in waves. It comes, maybe the waves are more separated over time, and maybe they're not as steep as they used to be, but it comes in waves. And to be honest, I've been hit by a pretty steep wave of grief in association with kind of revisiting this whole question of her life and death. So it hasn't been a time of jubilation for me, to be honest. It's been a time of suffering. I mean, it's not a great suffering. It's not like getting shot or anything like that, but it is a time of some suffering, of grief.
I understand what you're saying. My dad, who I really loved my dad. I had a deep mourning after he passed away, and it does come in waves. It's like I'll be fine, and then I'm not fine. It's like it's I understand what you're saying. I haven't been in your spot, but I understand what you're saying about that.
But Lori, November is just a great time for this because the church wants us to be thinking about death and those who have departed. And I've really come to appreciate through this experience the importance of the perduring importance of the beatitude, blessed are those who mourn. That this is something, it's like a vocation for a Christian to remember the dead and not to remember them in this way that doesn't cost us anything. It has to. It's, our Lord on the Sermon on the Mount understood that there's a cost there. There's some kind of suffering in mourning. So that's we carry that about with us.
Right.
You with respect to your father.
Yes. So, what do your children think?
Well, about this, the cause being opened, well, my children are really pro-life. I mean, I think that's the thing that they most like about the whole thing. Because, I've got a son who has just graduated from Catholic University of America who was so admirable for every Saturday go out with the students and pray rosary in front of the abortion clinic. He did that without fail, whatever the weather. Real stalwart pro-life kids. So I think they never knew her, of course, and the older children barely remember her. But and they kind of find it interesting because now there's a kind of widespread public attention to their own lives. It's not always welcome. It's uncomfortable to be looked at in that way. But so for many of us, I think it is a slight mortification. But again, it's not the worst suffering anyone's ever had to go through.
Interesting. So, briefly, what's the process of, what are the steps that has to happen? I would imagine it's a lengthy process. Is that safe to say?
Well, there's the bishop would like something called a private juridic person, which is essentially a corporation recognized by the church, to request formally that the cause be opened. That requires the submission to him of a petition, which can be fairly lengthy, like maybe 20 pages, something like that. So a not-for-profit corporation has been founded in the state of Massachusetts called the Ruth V.K. Pakaluk Foundation. And that is now, that foundation, that not-for-profit, is seeking to be recognized by the Bishop of Worcester, who's Robert McManus, as a private juridic person. When it has this status within Catholic canon law, it is going to assemble a petition which will formally request that the cause be opened. The bishop will examine that, and now that he has the leave from the Vatican, he just needs the vote of support from the U.S. Bishops' Conference, which no one thinks will be problematic, and then he can declare the cause to be opened. And then there'll be the usual examination of witnesses, the assembly of a kind of an examination of Ruth's life and writings. I guess a theologian has to go over her writings, an historian has to kind of put together an official biography, and then this gets submitted to the Congregation for the Causes of Saints in the Vatican. For the first step would be a declaration that she had lived the virtues heroically, and then she would be declared venerable. And then after that, you need one miracle that's certified, validated to be recognized as a beata, as a blessed, and then another miracle after that to be recognized as a sancta, as a saint. So those are the steps that are before us, and whether those steps are taken or not, that's all in the hands of God, which is fine with me, right? If it's God's will, it will go forward.
That's amazing. It's very exciting. I know I appreciate your honesty about how you're feeling and how your children are handling it. I think it's important, I mean, whatever people are going through, it's really important to just be honest about it, and not say, "Oh my gosh, everything's fine and great," when you have these thoughts. I think that's really interesting. Is there anything that you didn't get to say that you would like to say before I let you go?
No, just happy Thanksgiving. This is being recorded in Thanksgiving week, so there's actually an essay in the book Shock of Holiness called Thanks Within Thanks, which is another one of my favorites, Lori. In fact, among my children, one of them, Sarah, it's her favorite essay. She thinks it's the best one I ever wrote. And what it does is it takes Saint Thomas Aquinas's theology of the virtues surrounding gratitude, and it sees within the act of a mom feeding her family. I understood it to be Thanksgiving time. I don't remember whether that was explicit in the essay. All four aspects. So you see in this simple act of a mother giving food to her family on Thanksgiving all four aspects of the virtues related to gratitude.
I like that story too. It was the one with the bread, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I love that story too. There was a few. I'd have to really think about which ones were my favorites, but
Yeah, I feel like I should. I should turn the tables and ask which ones you like the best.
I actually really was interested in the ones about Saint Joseph because I
Yeah,
love Saint Joseph, and you said a
yeah,
lot of things that I'd never really heard before or thought about
yeah,
before, and so I thought
yes,
that section about Joseph and Mary, I think that whole section, that whole part was very interesting because I do often think about them as a couple or a pair or a team, and the things that they had to go through together, and I thought that was probably my favorite part.
yeah, yeah. I think they're pretty successful, and I think that I came up with some insights for myself that are not widely shared about Saint Joseph. In those, I think there are actually 5 essays on Saint Joseph. So I think that should be very helpful to people.
Well, happy Thanksgiving to you as well. And I really have enjoyed this conversation. And I know that my listeners will really enjoy your book. So we'll put a link in the show notes and buy it for all the people on your list. Just order a stack.
Yeah, exactly. They're not that expensive, and everybody will love them. And the
And
covers
well,
are beautiful.
this is coming out after Black Friday, so you're missing the Friday deal, but it's still a really good deal. It's very reasonably
Yeah,
priced, so check it out. And thank you for coming today. I appreciate you so much.
it's been a real pleasure. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you. Love you. Bye. Thank you for joining me today. Now go out and be a bright light in someone's life. And remember, be focused, be faithful, and be fresh. Fresh Catholic is produced, edited, and recorded in Ventura, California.